All right, welcome back to the Sports Business Take Podcast, your home for sports industry news with a little personality. I'm Paul Hine. He is Zach Creekmore. How you doing today, Zach?
Doing good, Paul. How are you, brother?
I'm great, man. We both got fresh cuts. We're looking good, feeling good, podcasting good. So,
Oh yeah.
or at least hopefully, that's always our goal. I've had an interesting morning for sure. I had a job interview this morning for the first time in a long time. I'm not sure if I should say the organization quite yet or not because I don't want to jinx myself. But it was a videography social media role, so I'm hoping I can do that. That's something that I've been wanting to dip my toes into for sure for a while. I haven't really gotten around to the videography too much yet, but we're starting to up our game on our social media accounts a little bit. You see the video I posted yet last night?
Probably not.
No, I downloaded CapCut and started slicing together some stuff for us. So
Love it.
We're gonna start using that a little more. So for those of you who are listening, look forward to that. I tried to use Adobe Premiere Pro. I'm still trying to learn it, but yesterday it was giving me some trouble. So I'm still working on it. You know, we're learning, but that's part of the process for sure. How about you? How are you?
I'm doing good. Going through the swim season, been working hard, been coaching. Coached all Thanksgiving weekend up in Massachusetts, or down in Massachusetts, I guess. I'm in Maine. I always think I'm in Connecticut for some reason, but had a good time and it's going well. I got to I'm currently coaching a U15s team, which has been really, really interesting opportunity, especially because I'm only 20 myself, so it's hard to not be seen as like their peer.
Right.
So
Right.
establishing that hierarchical
Yeah, that's an
system of how
interesting
we're working
dynamic
and
for
building,
sure.
yeah, it's super interesting. But it's been a lot of fun, and I'm loving the work that I'm doing. So super psyched to keep it going.
Awesome. That's awesome to hear about. You want to introduce our first topic today?
Yes, absolutely. So for our first topic, we're talking about the NFL's first ever Black Friday game and its advertisements. So fact, first ever Black Friday game, right? Paul, what do we think about that?
Man, I can't believe they didn't think of this sooner, right? Because now for football fans, this is awesome. You have like 5 days in a row of just straight football between NFL
Mm,
and college. I mean, it's awesome. You get the 3 Thanksgiving Day games, right? Which are traditional, probably some of the most watched games of the year outside of the Super Bowl and, you know, maybe some of the championship games. But then, you know, you get this Black Friday game where you're still hyped up from Thanksgiving, right? And so you're still like in the football mindset as a fan, and you're ready to go. And they picked two really good teams to start it off. The Dolphins, super explosive, and the Jets definitely on the come up. You know, or at least you know prior to Aaron Rodgers' ankle injury had been. So for sure, it was super interesting. And then, you know, of course, you have college football on Saturday, and then
mm.
NFL football on Sunday, and then NFL football on Monday. So you get 5 days in a row, and it's a really good way to keep their product constantly in their consumer's mind, right? And that's what I thought of. The first thing that came to my head is this is an attempt to just stay top of mind, stay present, and not only that, but also make some more money while doing it, which they did. They made a lot, particularly Amazon, because Amazon was charging companies $880,000 and $900,000 for a 30-second ad slot for that game, which is double the price of the Thanksgiving Day football game ads the day prior, and that's not really exactly in the spirit of Black Friday. You know, all the discounts and stuff, and then you're charging companies double to advertise.
Mm.
But no, I thought, you know, could be a huge opportunity going forward for sure.
Absolutely. Just mind blowing. Awesome to see all the engagement and kind of that price point is mind blowing. But you're also thinking it's the number one shopping day of our calendar, right? When you
Right.
really think about it, it's Black
It
Friday to
is.
Cyber Monday,
Absolutely.
and they're really going and attacking that. And I agree. I'm shocked that the NFL hasn't thought of this sooner and hasn't progressed into this sooner, right? Just because it's such a simple and easy concept to have games all weekend because you're getting more eyes on your product and more
Whoever
eyes
came
on
up
your
with this
team.
idea should be promoted.
Agreed, 120%, right? Um, super interesting fact here, right? Games were available to anyone with an Amazon account. So, in other words, they didn't have to be subscribed to Amazon Prime, right? What do we think about in terms of the advertisement and that increasing the ad price, right? Because it's totally open to everyone, right? Do you think that had any impact?
Yeah, probably. I mean, I feel like they had to make it open to everyone though for the first time they were ever doing it
Mm,
because, if they don't do that, then the people who don't subscribe to Amazon Prime aren't going to be like, "Yeah, I'm going to subscribe." No, they're just going to say, I mean, it's one game, like does it really matter that much? Like unless it's your favorite team, I don't really see that happening, for the rest of the fans of the NFL outside of, Dolphins and Jets fans in this case. But I feel like they had to make it um, open to everybody. But for sure, that could have been a factor into why the ad price increased so much because, you know, to Amazon, that's them, opening their doors to losing money a little bit, or at least not
mm.
gaining money through subscribers. So they felt like maybe they felt like they had to cover that aspect of themselves a little bit. You know what I mean? You know
Yes,
what
I
I'm
know
trying to
exactly
say.
what you're saying. Right?
Um,
They're covering their expenses through the streaming because
yes.
they had to pay what was it? It was 100 million just for the
Yeah, it was
streaming
100
rights,
million for the
right?
streaming rights. I was
So you're
just about to
charging
mention
that
that.
much because you're foregoing the normal revenue you might have from new people signing
Yeah,
up to your streaming service,
right.
and that way you can make that money back, and you're hopefully able to make a profit on your
Yeah,
game day.
absolutely.
But
And that's a huge revenue source for the NFL. 100 million for streaming rights
yeah,
for one game. Like that doesn't happen too often, outside of probably the Super Bowl. Um, and I think part of I'm going to talk about the ads for a second. I think part of what
yes,
made this game so interesting from an ad perspective and from a marketing perspective was that Amazon was offering a much larger quantity of interactive ads where the viewer can not only see the product but also have QR codes or interactive banners. Double what they usually do. They were offering double. So
mm,
to me, this is a great way to get viewers' attention and get them to interact with your product. And I'm actually going to use an example from a paper I just wrote. I had to write a paper for sports marketing on a sports event. We had to watch a game and write a paper about it. And I watched the Celtics game on Tuesday night, and they used interactive ads with QR codes for people to book their holiday suites as like part of one of their Christmas commercials. And I was like, oh, that's interesting because at the same time I was doing that, I wrote our episode today and learned about the interactive ads, and I was like, oh wow, so this is a widespread tactic that teams are using, right? And I think it's probably one of the better ways to advertise, right? That makes sense because it's not only saying here's our product, it's saying here's our product and here's what you can do with it, right?
mm.
It's a call to action for you to interact with it. And call to action is a marketing term. I'm sure you know that though. So that's just part of what I thought was interesting about the ad piece of this story.
Yeah, super interesting, especially when you take about it. You're showing an ad, you're showing interactive aspects of it, you're showing what you could do with the product, and then you're telling them you can get it for this discounted fee once they click that QR code or go to that place because it's Black Friday, right? So I'm imagining that the companies that did do this revenue and did put those ads out there, their revenue streams must have been immense, right? And
Yeah.
so super impressive, definitely worth it. And it definitely is the future of our information, how information is communicated, right? Because I was sitting here last night and I'm going to go into my RA role, right? Just for example, right? And every flyer that I made in the last night and this morning, I have a
Yeah.
QR code that references information that shows why
Mm-hmm.
the information on this flyer is useful and where they can go to access more information on it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Not only is that communicating more, not only does that go beyond, right? It does that extra step. And that's exactly what an interactive ad with a QR code does. It gives you that opportunity that if you're interested, you have that place to immediately go where you can learn more, right? So they're really grabbing your attention via the interactive and all those ad pieces and building something here, which has been beautiful to see grow, especially in the last what? Because I don't think I saw QR codes used in advertisements till I was in college. So
Yeah,
3
certainly the
years.
last couple of years. Yeah, for sure. I don't remember seeing this as a kid at all. So I agree. I
Mm,
haven't seen it really before college. So I think part of what makes this interesting is just that the NFL knew that this was going to be a win for their partners, right? So, like, no matter what they were going to do with not having the game, having these types of ads is going to incentivize partners more to
mm,
want to work with you, right? Because it's a different level of getting their product out there. It's a different level of interaction for the consumer, really. And so, when the consumer becomes closer to the product, that can only mean good things for sales, right? So there's a whole cycle of making money here. They know exactly what they're doing.
Oh, absolutely. The NFL knows what they're doing. Their partners know what they're doing. They know exactly the audience they're attacking. Not attacking, that's a bad phrase, but the audience that they're targeting here, right, to make their
Mm-hmm.
marketing well and make the most money they possibly can. The
Mm-hmm.
NFL even said this, right? We
I was
know our
just about
Thursday
to put this quote in too, so go ahead.
we know our Thursday night football viewers are affluent and highly engaged, which makes them ideal holiday shoppers. Amazon head of NFL ad sales, Daniel Carney, is who said this. He's told Sportico, when you take our scale and then factor in the quality of the TNF Thursday night football audience, and then add these ad solutions, it just leads to great results, right? NFL and specifically Mr. Carney here knew exactly what they were doing, knew exactly who they were marketing to,
Mm-hmm.
knew exactly who their audience would be,
Mm-hmm.
right? So it's just a beautiful combination of not only analytics and understanding your audience, but knowing what tools are you going to use to be able to go forward and make an interactive experience where you're going to see success, and so are all those that interact with your brand and your product here.
Absolutely. And it's a really good move by their marketing teams, right? This was super smart. And for any of those who are interested in sports marketing or looking to get into marketing in general, pay attention to this, because this is the type of stuff you have to pay attention to in order to reach the right audience, right? Obviously, I'm still learning how to try to market our product, right, to people. And I started like this week, I was doing everything I could that I could think of to try to get our stuff out there a little bit more. I joined Twitter groups, I downloaded different apps to edit stuff. I was doing whatever I could, and it's hard, right? It's hard to get your brand out there sometimes. So strategies like this, where you know exactly who you're targeting and who you want to view it, are super smart in terms of the success rate that you're going to have, right? They're
Mm.
going to have a much higher success rate if they know who they're targeting and tailor their content to them versus just putting content out there for everybody.
Agreed. Well said. You're fishing with a specified bait, with a lure that
For
has
sure.
that, what fish you're attracting, right? So the
For sure.
odds, if you're fishing for that specific fish, the odds you're going to get that fish you want is a lot higher than if you're just casting a line out there with a little piece of bread on the end and saying, "Oh, I'm going to catch something. I'm going to catch something." Right? You're
Yeah.
specifying. You're focusing on an audience that you not only have, but you also know the age range that it's in, the demographics that are part of it, probably their financials as well, which is part of that, and knowing what's going to be successful and what's going to catch their interest, not only from a marketing perspective, but also from a sales perspective, right? So it
Yeah,
makes it super effective.
absolutely. The one thing that I would say surprised me, which just came out yesterday, which is why I added this, is that the results in terms of the viewership wasn't very good. And I wanted to ask you a question. Like it wasn't awful, right? But for the NFL standards, for at least for Amazon, it wasn't great. It averaged 9.61 million viewers, which was the second least watched game on Amazon this year. So in the big scheme of things, not a big deal, right?
Mm.
But having it be the second least watched game on one of your partners for this year, on a time where it's the first time you're doing it, so it should be like appealing to people, right? Because it's like a shiny new toy, right? For football fans. So I wanted to ask you, do you think that, and I'm dead serious, Do you think that people weren't watching this game because they were out shopping?
I don't think necessarily, but I think that definitely there's some travel related aspect that definitely play a role. I know I myself, I got up Friday morning, had breakfast, did some homework, got in my car, and drove 3.5 hours to a game I had to coach.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So I think Black Friday is one of those number one travel days in the year,
Oh yeah,
around
because
that
a lot of
Thanksgiving
people are coming
weekend.
back. Mm-hmm.
Right. So
A lot
people
of
are
people are
coming
coming back
back,
from
people are
Thanksgiving.
going away, right? Whatever it is. So you're seeing people either be in their car so they're not watching the game. And even though I'm not going to go into what I do when I drive, but they're not going to be watching a football game while they drive because it's considered dangerous, right?
Right. Of
Um,
course.
in addition, it's not a type of thing that it's grabbing the eye. And it's hard for me to say that it's solely caused by shopping or
Right.
by that rush, what is a traditional Black Friday type
But
of
it's got to
thing,
factor in, right?
but it definitely does, right? So I think there's a lot of people who might have been spending the time of the day, either they're out with their family or they're doing something, or maybe they're hungover from Thanksgiving night because they went a little bit too crazy, right? I know
Mm-hmm.
for me, a traditional Black Friday for me would be I wake up, and we pretty much just veg and eat Thanksgiving leftovers. I'm not thinking about sports at all. So,
Yeah, me neither. Well, because really there traditionally hasn't been sports on Black Friday until this. And maybe they're trying to change that perception, which I like. It could be smart, and I think teams recognize that it's smart too because there are already teams that have offered to host this every year, but the
mm,
NFL doesn't want to do that yet because they wanted to see how he was going to perform, and they can't just give out a contract to a team for this every year when they don't know if they're 100% committed to it going forward and all that kind of stuff.
right.
So they haven't they haven't done that yet. But the fact that the teams are recognizing that this could be an amazing opportunity to market their product and put their brand out there too tells me that this is going to be around for years to come.
Agreed, and I definitely think it will be. I think the hardest part is when you're looking at a weekend that is so surrounded and so rich in tradition in terms of Thursday night football and what that means for a Thanksgiving dinner. Like, you're having Thanksgiving dinner and you're watching football. That is the
Oh yeah,
classic
absolutely.
American story of what Thanksgiving is,
Yeah,
right?
your family
That's
eats
what it
during
has been
halftime.
for
That's what it is.
30, 40 years, right? Exactly, right? You eat dinner during halftime or you get dessert during halftime,
Yeah.
right? And you sit down as a family and you watch the game. Okay. That's a huge part of what it has been historically. And going and changing that and saying, okay, we have these 3 Thursday night games also, great, but now we're adding in this Friday game. And I know for me, my focus when I was watching the games on Thursday night was holy moly, I had some good turkey. Now I'm going to watch some football while I have a little bit of apple crisp, right? Or
Absolutely.
pear crisp.
Yeah.
I was not watching the ads, nor was I really thinking about, oh, there's a game tomorrow. Like, I heard about the Dolphins
Right.
versus Jets game, but the whole time I was watching it, I had no clue when they were playing. I'm like, oh, they're playing on Thanksgiving? Was my
Right.
immediate thought. My mom asked the question, when do they play? And I literally told her, I do not know. So
I
you,
do feel like they could have like ahead of time advertised it a little bit more just on their games, like on their product, like, weeks before. I saw maybe a couple of times. We usually watch Thursday and Monday night football in my suite. That's kind of like our thing in the common room. We all watch it. So like I saw it a couple of times like the week before, but I feel like that's something you've got to promote for months, right? If that's the first
mm,
time you're doing it. I don't know. Like I didn't even know what time they were playing honestly until the day of, or really I learned because of watching the Thanksgiving football game and not because of looking into the story. I did know that it was a thing, right? Obviously, like I had heard about it and I thought it was a really cool idea, but I do think that maybe they should promote it a little bit more ahead of time and maybe that would help some of the viewership. I'm not going to say problem because I don't even really think it's a problem. The
no.
9.1 or the 9.61 million viewers that they had for this game is still more than the World Series had, which is kind of crazy to me when I read that it's the second least watched game just on Amazon this year for football, and it still had more viewers than the World Series. But that's a whole different conversation.
Mm,
But yeah, I just like I don't think that is a big problem. You know what I mean? I don't think it'll be a big problem going forward. I feel like as this cements itself as a tradition on this weekend, that it'll grow.
Agreed, and I totally agree. I think the problem may have been an advertising aspect of I
Mhm.
didn't know about the game. I don't think a lot of people may have not, but they still had great viewership numbers. One, they had 9.61 million, right, which is awesome, huge, right? And they also were able to go and say, all right, here's the first time we're doing this. We're injecting this into our what is the NFL's Thanksgiving weekend, right? Adding that to our, I guess you could say, history, and now hopefully we can build on it because we did see some success, right? It's not like it was a total failure of people boycotted the game and didn't go or anything like that,
Right.
right? And they picked a historical franchise that a family would want to watch, right? They picked Jets versus Miami, historical, big rivalry from the 70s or so, something like that. I don't even remember.
I mean,
I'm not a
yes,
big NFL guy. But,
in division opponents.
right, in division opponents, they faced off against each other a lot through history. It's been a big deal. Like, my mom was asking about the game. That's the only reason I'm saying this, right? Because I know
Yeah.
my mom's a Miami Dolphins fans because she
Oh, I thought
watched
you were
them
going
in
to
the
say Jets
80s
fan
and
because you guys are from
no,
Connecticut. You
no,
had me
I
fooled there.
we have my family is really weird with sports. I have to say, like just really really whack. We're all over the place.
You could guess mine very easily.
Oh, you're all Boston all the way.
Yeah, absolutely. It happens being from Mass. But yeah, I think it's gonna cement itself as a good tradition. I wouldn't even call this like, even though it didn't necessarily pop off in terms of the attention it got from the consumers for the NFL, I definitely wouldn't call it a loss. I would call it a win because of the fact that they got an extra $100 million, right? Just for
Yeah,
one game,
absolutely.
right? I mean, that's a big deal. That's definitely a bigger deal than a lot of people realize for sure. And like the NFL makes billions of dollars every year, but $100 million is still a lot of money, and you can put that towards a bunch of different things, whether it's research development, marketing, sales, whatever, hiring new people, whatever you want to do with it. There's having that money is going to be super beneficial for them in the long run. So, and beneficial for their partners too, right? They're giving their partners another chance to put themselves out there. So that was really my few main takeaways from this.
Agreed. Absolutely. The great great source of revenue. You're adding something new, which is another source of revenue, right? And you're taking a game that would usually have been played either on that Sunday or that Thursday, and you're putting it in a different time slot, which I was surprised the NFL hasn't done regularly in terms of
Yeah.
expanding their day calendar of playing on Saturdays or playing on Fridays, and something I don't
Yeah,
see that.
well, Saturdays is the college football thing. That's
Right, and
that's really what it is.
that's why. And that's part like I don't for soccer, right? That doesn't matter, right? The
Mhm.
Premier League still goes and dominates, and so they don't care who plays on what day. Everybody's playing on. There's
Right,
Thursday games, there's Saturday games, there's a Monday game, right? And
right.
there's the schedule is always packed.
Well, everybody in
Um,
the world watched the Premier League, but let's say college football is really kind of an American thing in terms of
yes,
the audience size. I mean, I'm sure some people in Europe watch. There are European football, like American football leagues, but at the same time, that is primarily an American thing. So, having the NFL realizing that they have primarily an American audience and that college football also has primarily an American audience, they realized that it just wouldn't be smart to compete with them on Saturdays. But I do think the Friday is open, right? That is kind of open. There is usually like one or two college football games on Friday night, but not during the day. So
mm,
particularly during the day, this is a smart move for them. Uh,
agreed.
that's about all I had on this. If you want to move on,
Yeah, I'm good. Just good work from the NFL there, right?
yeah, absolutely.
Good work.
All right.
Wait for another to create another revenue stream.
Speaking of good work, something that could really help the NHL is that they restructured their All Star Weekend. They expanded it to a 3-day event, and I really like. So I didn't understand this at first. I thought they moved the actual NFL or not NFL NHL draft to the Thursday of this weekend of their
Okay.
All Star Weekend, but it's an All Star player draft,
Oh,
not their draft. So basically, the way it works is the captains of the 4 All Star teams are paired with celebrity captains from previous All Star games, and they will select their teams from the remaining pool of All Star players, which I think is a really interesting concept. And I'm not sure I've ever heard of that before. Have you ever heard of any concept like this before? An
I have
all-star
not seen
player
it.
draft?
Yeah, no.
I I think this is really cool. And maybe they won't get a lot of people to watch, but to like watch this draft, but they certainly will be able to use it on social media for, a bunch of different collabs. And I'm not sure if the celebrities are, I'm sure some of them will be like past players or former players, but they could have actual celebrity captains. And then, the collab possibilities that you could have on social media are endless. You know what I mean?
Mm.
So I think that is a really interesting concept in terms of, um, it's really unique and not something that you see a lot. And it's the NHL once again showing some innovation.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, NHL, we've talked about it for the last, what, 3 podcasts about the
Yeah,
NHL innovating and making a difference,
yeah, they've been
and
on a roll
creating new
lately with
creative
us at least.
concepts. Yeah, they've been on a roll this year, I really think.
Yeah, I
So
think so
hoping to
too.
see more. And I think this is definitely super creative of not only the advertising opportunities, but also, again, creating another revenue stream, right? It's another
Absolutely.
space where somebody, no matter how little, how somebody can watch, how advertisement space can be sold, right? You're getting more eyes on your teams, more eyes on your players, more eyes on your league, in short, which is super cool. And I think they probably made this call looking at the NBA's All Star Week and how, like, when you have
Hmm.
the captains and you do the picks, and I think that's a highly followed type of thing, especially for the All Star
Yep,
game. Although
for sure.
the NBA All Star game might be treated a little bit as a joke right now. Um,
Yeah, we've talked about that before too.
Right. And then there's that aspect of it that people do watch that. They want to see who gets picked. They want to see who gets that honor and that respect.
Yeah, that is
Um,
the closest thing that you can compare to this.
yeah, absolutely. And I think it's definitely good to see the NHL going in that direction. And same thing of we've seen the MLS add in a mid-season tournament. We've seen the NBA add in a mid-season tournament. We're seeing a lot of U.S. leagues go and kind of copy off of each other and take similar ideas and concepts and saying, "Oh, that works here in this U.S. league. Let's apply it here." Right,
I
with
love that
the
though.
different
Sports is a
systems.
small world.
Absolutely, I love it. I think it's awesome. I like seeing things where I see comparables in everything I watch, where that it gets me more interested because I can go and create a quicker link to something I've watched before because it makes a new sport for me easier to follow, right? Because if I was a MLS fan, it makes it a lot easier for me to go and follow the NBA now because they're having a midseason tournament that's very similar to what the
Right.
MLS did, right? And I've learned that totally new thing.
Which, by the way,
And
has been super successful. I feel like their midseason tournament so far. Even the players are saying, I told you I watched the Celtics game the other night. The players are saying they feel like they're playing harder, like the games matter more. So, just to flash back to an episode we did a couple weeks ago, they've been super successful with that so far. So, I do like that all the leagues are kind of bouncing ideas off of each other. Well, maybe not necessarily, but in a way, they're bouncing ideas off of each other. And their goal, all of these leagues' goals, is to constantly be innovating. And I think the NHL, as part of this All Star Weekend, which we haven't mentioned yet, I think their primary innovation here, and probably the one that at least I think is the biggest deal, is the fact that they're going to have a professional women's hockey league 3-on-3 showcase.
mm,
So this means the women's game will be part of All Star Weekend, which is going to be unbelievable for their viewership, right? Think about, I know like professional women's hockey doesn't have like a huge following, right? In like the national scope of things, but there are thousands, hundreds of thousands of women's hockey players across the country, right? High school, college, lower levels, whatever you want to point to, that are fans, right? And now they can have something that they can identify with a little bit more than the NHL's product.
absolutely, and well said. There's definitely an audience for what they're doing here, and I think the biggest part of it is to see the NHL, which is the male league, and hockey is a sport which has been male dominated for a long time. Invest in the infrastructure and development of professional women's hockey is great, right? It's something that we've seen and that
Absolutely.
I think we've needed for a long time in terms of we're trying to develop sports in the U.S. and throughout the U.S. Right? You look at the MLS right now, you look at the NWSL right now, right? And you look and like They are considered at a
Mm-hmm.
kind of comparable level, right? Those things are experiencing a lot of growth very quickly. Look at the NBA, then there's the WNBA, right? I think there's a bit more of a gap between those two right now, and I think if there's more investment from the NBA into WNBA actions, maybe you can see a growth there. I think the NHL is doing something here where they should be looking to develop something like the WNHL or something like that. I don't know what professional women's hockey what the league is called at the moment, but we've seen
It's
leagues
called
being
the
founded in
PWHL.
the PWHL. Thank you. Right. If they're investing in that, they want to see it succeed, especially because we've seen women's hockey leagues come and go in the past, especially throughout the years. So something that hopefully we can see it develop in women's sports throughout the U.S. as a professional opportunity to develop and continue to grow. Right. The NHL investing in that will be a huge part.
So you think this grows the women's game's influence?
I think absolutely it'll play a huge role in growing their influence and also growing the amount of eyes they're getting on their games outside of just that direct audience of people who are women's hockey fans already, right? You're having an NHL viewer who normally probably wouldn't watch a women's hockey game, but's watching the All-Star game and goes, "Oh, they're class. They're good at hockey. Yeah, I want to watch a game." Maybe that'll
Right.
draw their eyes onto something like that where they get that viewership, right? And you're kind of getting the best of both worlds where the NHL might be getting some extra viewers on their All-Star game weekend, while also say it again, PWHL.
PWHL.
Thank you. The PWHL is getting those eyes on their games as well and hopefully on their franchises, right? So that they can get a little bit extra revenue, or maybe there's a franchise in somebody's city and they didn't know about it and now all of a sudden they're going to games, right?
Yeah, for sure. Um, if this happens to be a bump in viewership for the NHL, do you think we see the event expand to a normal game beyond? This is a 3-on-3, basically a scrimmage, right? This is going to be a
Right.
3-on-3 scrimmage to showcase the women's players' skills. Do you think that if we see it succeed and succeed a lot, do you think this goes beyond a 3-on-3 game into a full hockey game?
Yeah, absolutely. I think we can see that happen. I think it'll take probably a couple of years. I don't think it'll happen in the immediacy, but as we've seen the celebrity all-star game for the NBA grow, in that type of way of you're having that secondary game that draws extra viewership and has that audience, you can definitely see this grow in a similar way of we're having two games that are a big deal and they have the PWHL draft while they also have the NHL draft, right? And you have all these things that happen in tandem, and it's really a combination of what is the beautiful game of hockey, right, and what does it mean between each gender and all of this. So definitely something we can see happen, and hopefully, I would love to see it happen myself. Right, I want to see that sport develop. I want to see that area develop. The
Absolutely.
more, the merrier, always.
And more jobs open for us, right?
Oh
If
yeah,
they grow. um, no, but in all seriousness, I do think that this is going to be huge for the women's game, and I think the NHL is it's going to be a mutually beneficial relationship. You know what I mean?
mm,
Um, and I think that's pretty much my big takeaway from that whole story. So
agreed.
super excited to see what the All-Star weekend looks like now that they've expanded it to 3 days instead of 2, and super excited to see how the women's 3-on-3 showcase is laid out. Definitely going to be tuning in for that. I think it's time to move on to our sports quote of the weeks. So mine was from Supreme Court Commissioner Michael Johnson about basically the Pac-12 situation, how there are only 2 remaining schools in the Pac-12 now that all the others have decided to realign with different conferences for next year. So the Supreme Court Commissioner said tens of millions of dollars are at stake due to the media and sponsorship rights affected by this dispute. School reputations and individual collegiate programs could be affected positively or negatively depending on the institution. Staffing levels will likely be affected one way or another. It cannot be doubted that athletic recruiting and student athletes attending or deciding which schools to attend are affected greatly by these events. So that last part was the most interesting to me of that whole quote. What do you think the Pac-2 now? What do you think the Pac-2 situation does for recruiting?
Yeah, I think simply put, right? If we're talking about schools that are left in the Pac-12 franchise, right, it's showing that the product they have and the competition that they have been in for the last however many years is no longer viable. It is also is no longer desirable from a financial standpoint because the schools that are in it are wanting to leave and move on and move out. So why should they go to a Pac-12 school when it clearly isn't something that is desirable from a athlete standpoint or desirable from a viewership standpoint anymore, right? Especially because we're seeing play a
Right.
huge role, right? And then be able to make that profit. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, personally, I'm thinking if there's only two schools in this conference, is this conference even going to be around? Are these schools going to fold their programs? Is my future secure? Am I going to make not only am I going to have an educator, well, a spot on this team? Am I going to be able to make any money off of this with the NIL stuff you were just talking about? So this creates a lot of questions in recruits' heads that wouldn't be there otherwise, right? There's a lot of uncertainty in terms of how these conferences are going to realign and how the whole college football landscape is going to look now that we have a lot of schools that are in different parts of the country, right? Joining conferences that aren't anywhere near them necessarily, right? So it's super interesting, the whole conference realignment shift that is going on right now. And I think this quote really outlines well the different levels that it can affect college sports on. There's several different levels, right? And a lot of people just think about like the player level and the school level, but they don't really think about the staffing level or the recruiting side of it, right? I think the staffing part is interesting too, right? Because who's going to want to go work for a program that might fold in a year or two, right? If the conference isn't there. I mean, I'm sure they're going to bid to be in a new conference if their conference decides to fold, or maybe they'll do. I forget where it was, but I saw an interesting proposal that these Pac-2 teams join like the Mountain West and have a relegation and promotion system where like two teams would go up to the Pac-2 every year, and then two teams would go down. And I think that's super interesting. So not that idea is actually has any basis in reality, but it was just something I saw on Twitter that I thought was kind of cool. So
Absolutely.
there's so many possibilities that I'm like super interested to see how this works out. And I think a lot of people don't think about, like, I know I already said it, but like the amount of different things that are going to be affected by this realignment.
Yeah, absolutely. Because you think it's beyond the players that are there right now. It's beyond the coaches that are there right now. It's beyond all the other teams involved in that college, right? It goes beyond. It's the people who work for the school. It's people who work for that franchise. It's the people who work the fields. People who work the games, the ticket sales, right? It's all of those
Absolutely.
people. It's
All the
people
way down
going
to
to
the
the
interns.
school. The people who got recruited this year are going there and have committed, right? Holy moly, their situation just changed.
Yeah.
Are they going to
I don't know how
decommit?
I would feel if I was a senior who just got recruited to be at Oregon State right now. I don't know how I would feel about that. That's a super interesting situation. And, I wonder if it's going to scare some players away. I saw that Oregon State's quarterback, DJ, and I'm not going to try to pronounce the last name. You know who I'm talking about, DJ Uyungule or something like that. I can't pronounce it right, and I'm so sorry to him for that. But I saw that he's entering the transfer portal, and that's one of the two schools, right? That's their starting quarterback. So I wonder if it's starting to scare some players away too, right? There's going to be major ripple effects from this conference realignment.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And, I don't know everything about how it's going to work out yet. I think nobody does. And I know we don't typically talk about college sports on here a ton, but I think it's going to be super interesting because we're talking about a lot of money, right? College sports, college football in particular, brings in a ton of money to the schools. So, do schools that are leaving the Pac-12 see an increase in their revenue because they joined a different conference like the SEC or the ACC, or do they see a decrease in revenue because they can't get local ad partners because they're not playing local teams, that kind of thing. Or, and there's just the third possibility, and probably I think the most likely, that the Pac-2 teams are having a hard time bringing in revenue because there's only 2 teams in their conference. So I think that's probably the most likely possibility. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I totally agree. I think the part of what makes sports interesting and what makes sports revenue really high is the aspect of there is an unpredictability, right? You never know what's going to happen. And when it becomes a 2-horse race, right, it can get boring for some fans, right? You're not competing.
Absolutely.
It's a 2-horse race competing for a conference championship here, right?
I don't
Am I
believe they're going to
mistaken in
stay
that
a
concept?
Pac-2. Yeah,
I don't think they will either. But when you really think
at
about
least
it,
for a
right
long
now,
time.
that's the situation they're looking at,
Right.
right?
At
So
least for next year.
correct. And hopefully that changes, because when you're looking at it, you're thinking, where is the value of me watching that or having interest in that when I
Right.
know they're going to
Exactly.
make the championship game? Why does their regular season
Right.
game
Yeah.
even matter then, even if like beyond their just having a good record, right?
Right. I mean, yeah, especially with the expanded playoff format coming in next year as well, that would totally change everything in terms of, how the ranking gets done. How do you rank teams that only have 2 teams in their conference, So there's definitely a lot of different interesting aspects to it.
Mm.
I'm sorry I've stumbled a couple of times today.
You're okay. I have
Do you
too,
want to?
Paul. No worries to apologize. We're moving.
I already did like my professional talk for the day, in my interview this morning. So my brain's a little taxed. But do you want to get to your sports quote of the week?
Yeah, absolutely. Super excited to kind of share a little bit on the story of Bayer Leverkusen, who currently sit first in the Bundesliga after recently hiring Xabi Alonso. They hired him last season. Xabi Alonso, if you don't know who he is kind of like an iconic midfielder from the mid to early 2000s, right? Where he played through somebody who you could describe as a metronome type of player who controlled the pace of the game. Not somebody who was fast, not somebody who was generally quick, but somebody who had really good control of the ball, and got his coaching badges through Real Sociedad, where he retired in the mid 2010s. Okay, he said this after being hired by Bayer Leverkusen, and after right now they currently sit first in the Bundesliga, on the best type of form we've seen since their 2002 treble of final defeats, where they lost in the last day of their league, they lost in their League Cup, and they lost in the Champions League final. Okay, so Xabi Alonso had this to say: he was encouraged to have his own pitch, have my own criteria on the pitch, to take my own decisions. That's something that I really push, and I want to invite my players. They have their own decision making. It's not about being robots. It's not about we always have to do this, and if you don't do this, you're going to be on the bench. So first of all, right, beautiful to see Bayer Leverkusen kind of come to a all fruition of maybe they have a chance of winning a title again after for years, in the last 20 years or so, being a team that's considered to be, we get to the very end, we get there to the last moment, and then we fail and we crash, and it creates a heart-wrenching story of they should have won, but they didn't, right? And Bayer Leverkusen now have the chance to do it again, right? Can they go and win? I'd love to see them do it. But not only that, we're seeing a progressive coach which has a beautiful vision and is giving his players the freedom to express themselves and play a beautiful game, right? So we're thinking about it as not only potential coaches ourselves, right? Or maybe as people who are going into the professional world who want to work in sports, take that freedom, right? We want to push, we want to innovate, we want to make our own decisions on the pitch, right? For example, speaking of the pitch as a metaphor here, right? It's not about being robotic and doing the right thing every time. It's about being able to make that creative decision and do something that maybe nobody else is able to do in that one moment that makes you amazing and makes you stand out, right? So we're talking about, and Paul, you had an interview today, right? You're thinking about that one thing that you can do in your interview, or that you could put in your resume, or that you could put in your portfolio that's going to make you stand out from every other applicant, right?
This.
Yeah, exactly, right? That one thing that's making you stand out. What makes you
I
what
actually
makes you
referenced
different?
like our podcast so many times today in my interview.
As you should, man. You do so much work for this, and
I mean,
it's that type of
I do
thing
my
that
best.
makes you the differential.
What I thought of when I saw this was freedom of creativity is
Mm,
basically what he's talking about, right? And I just applied for the interview I had today was for a creative role in sports, right? It's a videography, social media role. And in my interview, the guy was mentioning how like we would have a lot of creative freedom
mm,
but he also doesn't want every a creative intern to have the same thing, right? Like to be shooting in the same angle. So I think that's kind of interesting where when you're allowed to create your own thing, it can make something beautiful, right? It allows people to not only work inside and outside their comfort zone, but also to develop new skills that they did not know before. It's part of the reason that I looked into this job in the first place, but I definitely think I see a lot of that here in that quote.
mm. Agreed, absolutely. And that's something that we would hope to see that every one of our viewers, those listening, especially if you're wanting to be in the sports world, wanting to work in the sports world, you're able to not only go and translate someone else's vision, but go and have your own and execute your own and build your own passion and really put that into the work that you do. Not only when you're building your resume, right? Because you're going to pursue the things that you are passionate about that are going to make you different. Like for Paul, the podcast, for me, this podcast, for me, coaching, right? What's going to set me apart, right? And I think about that. I'm like, I don't see any other 20-year-old that I know who's coaching a U15 side for a
Yeah.
top Northeastern academy
Yeah.
type of school, type of team,
Absolutely.
right? And that's something where we're thinking about. One, I'm passionate about soccer. I'm passionate about coaching. I'm passionate about that aspect of my life, right? Two, I'm finding an area where a place where I can do that and I can really pursue that and challenge myself and not only pursue it, but also make connections and perform well, right?
Absolutely.
That type of
I have
thing
a
where you're
weird
able to put it
tie-in.
out there. Go for it.
So the part about where he's saying it's not about being a robot, right? It's not about being
Mm,
robots. I'm going to tie that into how like you have to differentiate yourselves to try to work in sports, right? You have to try to do things that other people aren't doing. Whatever, the curriculum is at your school and they're telling you like you have to do X, Y, and Z to get your degree and get a job and you'll be fine. Do more than that. You know what I mean?
mm,
Go find other skills that you can learn outside of the classroom because that's really what is going to separate you from the other people is those skills. And it shows companies that you're willing to put in more effort than everybody else. And I feel like that is really what you have to do now to work in sports is to say, this is what I'm doing to be different than everybody else. Take it or leave it.
right. Exactly. And well said, right? Powerful statement. Take it or leave it. This is who I am. This is what I've done. This is what I have, right? I poured my heart into this. I poured my passion. I poured my will, right? Are you going to take me for who I am and what I am and what I'm able to offer your company? Or are you going to leave me on the table, right?
Right.
And
And
that
it's
thing
part of
is,
becoming well-rounded too, right?
mm,
It's having a well-rounded skill set. If you start dipping your toes into a bunch of different things outside of the classroom, right? You're learning new skills. Now you know how to do a bunch of different things, and you are valuable in several different areas, right?
yeah,
So I think that's definitely it ties in a little bit to this quote that at least that I thought of.
I think it ties a huge piece into this quote. Because, like, as much as we could talk about athletes and athletics and their success and it being great to they need to have creativity on the field so that they can perform and be unpredictable. We're talking about here in a sports business. We are the sports business take, right? You
Yeah,
have to. We're thinking about this in a sports business lens. You have to, as a student or as a person who wants to work in sport, have that desire to be creative, right? To set yourself
absolutely.
aside, to be different, right? If
That's
you're
how innovation happens.
exactly, right? If you're going and looking to be, oh, I just want to be that guy who's like everybody else who makes his 50K, 55K a year, right? And I'm going to go and I'm going to sit there and show up and do my job and do what is expected of me,
Hmm.
right? Are you ever going to be somebody who blows somebody's mind or blows people away or who gets that huge promotion or gets that contract for 200K? Are you going to be that coach that goes and coaches at a D1 level. Do you think Nick Saban has done what he has been expected and told to do for his entire life? No, he's gone and done what is extraordinary. That's why he's considered the greatest coach in college football, right?
Right.
He's gone and done that next step, that extra piece that makes his teams and what he does extraordinary. So
Absolutely.
how can we as professionals go and do that? And part of it is really, how can you get that extra certification? How can you display that extra skill? How can you make your LinkedIn, social media look professional? All stuff we talked about in our podcast, right?
For sure.
And when we look at this quote, even though it's so focused on like what we work on the field and what Xabi Alonso here is focusing to tell his players, it's so true to us as professionals or people who want to work in the sports world as students, right? That you have to be willing to go above and beyond, do that extra step and make yourself unique, right?
Absolutely. I don't think I can say it any better than that. So I think I think that's where we'll end for the day. We've done almost an hour. So thank you guys so much for listening. Tell your friends about us. We're trying to get our name out there a little bit more, and tell your friends who work in sports about us so they can come on the show. Thank you guys for listening. As always, pay attention to our social channels. We'll start doing a little more interesting stuff. I've mostly been posting on there like clips from our recordings and stuff, but I'm gonna try to mix it up a little bit now and then. You know,
we're gonna hit different in winter break. I'm just
absolutely.
I'm saying it now. I'm saying it now.
We are gonna hit different in winter break, bro. It's the winter arc for sure.
Oh yeah.
It's the winter
oh
arc.
yeah. I love it. The winter arc. Yes.
All right. Thank you guys for listening. As always, go follow us on our social medias. If you don't know it by now, it's SBT_podcast on Instagram, SBT.pod23 on TikTok, and SBT_pod23 on Twitter. Also, go check out our YouTube, and we are now on Apple Podcasts officially. And that's what I made that video about actually from yesterday. So if you haven't seen that, go check it out. Thank you guys, and have a good week.